The story of America did not begin in 1492. It did not begin with a lost Italian sailor or a Spanish crown desperate for new trade routes. No, America's story begins long before that, long before the rise of Europe. Before the printing press, before the first Spanish galleon touched the Caribbean coast, another civilization mastered the knowledge of oceans, stars, winds, and the curvature of the earth. They were the Moors, African and North African mathematicians, astronomers, geographers, and navigators, a people who brought science to Europe, who built libraries that held hundreds of thousands of volumes, who discovered star paths that sailors still use today. But their greatest achievement, the one you were never taught about, was their journey across the Atlantic, centuries before Columbus ever set sail. For generations, this chapter was erased from textbooks, silenced from classrooms, and buried beneath European myths of discovery. Today, we open that chapter. The Moors were not one single group. They were scientists from Mali, traders from Senegal, scholars from Morocco, shipbuilders from Algeria and Tunisia, a melting pot of African and Arab knowledge. They ruled Spain and Portugal for over 700 years, creating the most advanced civilization in medieval Europe under Moorish rule. Córdoba became the largest city in Europe. Streetlights illuminated roads centuries before Paris or London. Libraries held nearly 500,000 manuscripts. Universities taught algebra, astronomy, engineering, medicine, cartography. Moorish sailors charted the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and West African coastlines. While Europe struggled through its dark ages, the Moors produced some of the world's greatest scientific minds. They studied the movement of stars, the speed of currents, the direction of global winds, the shape of the earth, the mathematics of navigation. These were not just scholars, they were explorers. And as early as the 10th century, Moorish expeditions pushed farther west into the unknown waters of the Atlantic, not by accident, by design. Before any European ship could cross the Atlantic, a specific set of technologies had to be developed. The triangular Latin sails, advanced compasses, star path navigation, wind current mapping, reinforced hull ships. These technologies were created, perfected, or introduced to Europe by the Moors. The astrolabe, a tool that allowed sailors to calculate their latitude using stars. Europe couldn't navigate open water without it. Latin sail. This triangular sail allowed ships to sail against the wind, something European vessels couldn't do before Moorish influence. Moorish map-making. Their maps were so accurate that even after the Moors fell, European explorers secretly depended on Moorish and Arab cartographers. In fact, one of the most famous European explorers, Prince Henry the Navigator, built his entire navigation school on Moorish scientific knowledge. Europe didn't discover the world, they used Moorish science to understand it. The most powerful, well-documented African expedition came from Mali, one of the largest and wealthiest empires in world history. The story of Emperor Abu Bakr II. In 1311, the ruler of Mali, Abu Bakr II, launched an expedition of hundreds of ships across the Atlantic. According to Arab historians, the ships were loaded with supplies. They followed the ocean currents west. Only one ship returned. The captain said the others had been pulled by a strong current. Abu Bakr II then built an even larger fleet and never returned. Historians now recognize the exact currents he followed, the Canary Current and the North Equatorial Current. The same currents that carried Columbus to the Caribbean nearly 200 years later. African oral histories speak of lands past the horizon, lands rich with mountains, rivers, and new people. This wasn't myth. This was exploration. And modern ocean studies confirm a fleet leaving West Africa will land in the Americas. Now we go to Mexico, to a civilization older than the Maya, older than the Aztec, the Olmec civilization. The Olmecs created the first pyramids in the Americas. Early writing systems, complex art, advanced stone engineering, and they left behind something that still shocks archaeologists today. The colossal heads. Massive stone sculptures weighing up to 40 tons, carved with unmistakably African facial features. Broad noses, full lips, rounded cheeks. Headgear, resembling West African helmets. Mainstream historians ignore the resemblance, but physical anthropologists, genetic researchers, and even early explorers documented African features in Olmec imagery. Even more intriguing, DNA traces found in pre-Columbian bones show markers linked to West African art through slavery, but centuries earlier. The Olmecs didn't just build a civilization, they may have encountered African travelers, and their art immortalized those encounters. The most controversial evidence comes from ancient maps. The Piri Reis map of 1513, created using older Moorish and Arab sources, shows parts of South America, the Caribbean, exact coastlines before European exploration, even Antarctica's shoreline is free, suggesting far older origins. European scholars asked a simple question. How did these mapmakers know? The answer points back to Moorish map archives, which were destroyed or stolen after 1492. Some maps included Arabic annotations, Moorish place names, African navigation notes, coastlines that Europeans had supposedly never seen. The Spanish crown classified many of these maps as forbidden knowledge, because they raised a dangerous question. If Africans knew the coasts of the Americas before Europeans, who really discovered the New World? Even Columbus himself left clues. In his journals, he wrote that people in the Caribbean had spears tipped with African gold. Indigenous people spoke of black men coming in large boats. Columbus believed Africans had visited the Americas before him. He used African and Moorish navigators on his own voyage. He relied on map-making techniques taught by the Moors. Columbus admitted multiple times that he was not the first, but history was rewritten in his favor, not because he discovered first, but because he conquered successfully. Comparisons between African and Native American cultures reveal striking similarities. Architecture with pyramid structures, similar weaving patterns. Metalworking techniques, linguistic patterns, shared symbols, agricultural knowledge, boat construction methods. Botanical studies also show African plants in America before European contact, including yams, cotton varieties, watermelon strains. Genetic studies now acknowledge early African native contact, because history leaves footprints that cannot be erased. So why was this never taught? Because European supremacy depended on one narrative. Europe discovered the world. Europe conquered the world. Therefore, Europe ruled the world. But if Africans reached America first, if Africans mastered navigation long before Europe, if Africans influenced early American civilizations, then the foundation of colonial history collapsed. Europe needed to maintain the myth. So textbooks removed African explorers. Universities dismissed African achievements. Moorish contributions became invisible. History wasn't lost, it was silenced. If Africans sailed to the Americas before Columbus, if their maps guided European explorers, if their faces were carved into ancient stone, if their ideas influenced early civilizations, then the story of America is far older and far more connected to Africa than the world ever admitted. This is not just Black history. This is world history, American history, human history. And the more we uncover, the clearer it becomes. The Moors didn't follow Europe. Europe followed the Moors.